Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Tom. How many of you were here at the opening of Men's Life 22 years ago? In my mind, that is one example of strength. When you think of strength, what do you think of? There's a book I read this summer by a woman named Nancy Pearcey, who is a professor of theology and apologetics at Houston Christian University. Apologetics is how you defend the faith. And the book is called The Toxic War on Masculinity. And she can say some things about men and to men that if a man said it might seem racist or inappropriate, but she can get away with it. And so I want to walk through that book and recalibrate our definition of what strength might be. Let me start by saying this. Pearcey first articulates that there is an open season right now on men societally. That our society says that masculinity in and of itself is toxic. So emasculation is the solution. That all men are patriarchal, that all men are domineering, which leaves men discouraged and devalued and demoralized. Here's some examples early on in the book to kind of strengthen her case. The Washington Post ran an article entitled, "Can't We Hate Men?" New Statesman featured a British feminist writing, "You can't hate all men, can you? Actually, I can. As a class, I hate men." The trendy hashtag is @KillAllMen. You can buy t-shirts emblazoned with the slogan, "So many men, so little ammunition." Books have appeared with titles like "I Hate Men," "The End of Men," "Are Men Necessary?" Universities are hotbeds of anti-male sentiment. An article in USA Today says, "At today's university, masculinity is almost never discussed except in negative terms, usually with the word toxic attached. Even some men have taken to maligning their own sex." A male blogger writes, "Talking about healthy masculinity is like talking about healthy cancer." Media researcher named Jim McNamara conducted an extensive content analysis of more than 2,000 mass media portrayals of men, including news, feature articles, talk shows, social media. He found that more than 75% of all media representations of men are patently negative. We're portrayed as villains, aggressors, perverts, and philanderers. Now, before you get too angry and too sanctimonious, some of the accusations are appropriate. The Me Too movement has revealed actions by people like Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby and Larry Nassar and Jeffrey Epstein that cannot be defended and must be opposed. Even the Me Church Too movement has revealed people like Ravi Zacharias and Bill Hybels' fall. And remember the Houston Chronicle article over several weeks about the 20-year study they did on Southern Baptist churches and revealing 700 victims in churches around the United States. So let me say sexual abuse is sinful, immoral, and must be named such. But with such negative narratives about men, boys are having trouble. So if you're a father or a grandfather, you've maybe seen or heard your kids or your grandchildren being disparaged as well. They're performing worse than girls at all levels of education: elementary, junior high, high school, college, post-college. Bookstores are filled with titles like "The Boy Crisis," "Boys Adrift," "The Trouble with Boys," "Why Boys Fail." One of the reasons, she says, is the impact of pornography on boys' ideas of what it means to be a man. because sexuality is often portrayed as cruelty or violence. It's having a devastatingly negative vision that's put in our brain when our brains are forming, and so things are being hardwired very early. The first exposure for boys to pornography these days is 9 years old. And because we have phones, because we have social media, it's often not, when you were growing up, a picture of a nude woman in a magazine, which seems really tame now. It is violent sex, it is rape, it is pederasty, it is all the kind of things that make boys wonder, what does it mean to have a normal relationship with a woman? The New Scientist says being male is now the single largest demographic factor for early death, which shocked me. The U.S. marriage rate is plummeting. Today it's at the lowest level ever. And even the church can be appropriately accused of forcing men to leave their masculinity at the door. Churches often want men to become women in their spirituality. Come into the church, but do it the woman way. And that's why John Eldredge and Wild at Heart and these kind of movements have stoked. Is there a male masculinity that can be courageous and adventurous and more wired to who we are? No wonder men stay on the periphery. And the question Piercy asks, is there a way forward? So the biblical grand story, you could have it in 4 or 5 sections, but she talks about it in 3 ways. There is creation, there is fall, and there is redemption. This should not be a shockingly new material for you. In creation, the idea from Genesis 1 and 2 is that all of us are created in the image of God. And we're created good, both men and women. So the narrative that masculinity in and of itself is horrendous is wrong biblically. Men are created in the image of God, and it's tov tov, very, very good. We are. Okay. And we're given a purpose. Be fruitful and multiply. Tend the earth and subdue it. Not destroy it, not devastate it, but steward it. Some of the ideas of co-creating that she puts down are building, have adventures, be in positive relationship with, farm, put up houses, mine for metals, invent tools, compose music, cultivate, create, and on and on. From the very beginning, men were supposed to use their unique gifts for the flourishing of the world, bringing forth the raw materials and then producing things that can help us. So the image of God is our original software, and that's good, but sin is the virus, she says. And sin just doesn't happen to men. It does happen to men, but not only men. Women have the virus too. So women are not off the hook here. Women are not pristine here. Women can't look at men and say, it's all about you. And men can't look at women and say, it's all about you. God can look at both of us and say, it is about you. You've taken the good creation and the good plan, and you've gone your own way. So creation and fall that both men and women are in requires redemption. And that comes through God sending his own son into the world to join us in the muck, to love us, to show us how to live, to die for us, that we could have new life. The Spirit could be put into us so that we could become, over time, more and more like Jesus and reclaim the garden, reclaim our purpose, reclaim relationship, reclaim hope. Okay. Now to Piercy's main thesis, which was very interesting to me. I'd never thought of it this way. Piercy postulates that throughout human history, most people lived on family farms or in peasant villages, Productive work was done in the home or its outbuildings, and it was not the father's job, but it was the family's industry altogether. Everyone worked together to produce and survive and thrive. They ate and prayed together. People took care of and supported neighbors when in need. The household was kind of this mini society where the teaching and living was done all together, and fathers were the priests of the household. Here's the book. And here's the ideal of strength that the pre-industrial revolution world. Virtue was defined as the willingness to sacrifice individual interests for the common good, encourage hard work, teamwork, collaboration. Men protected and provided for household and community. Then with the Industrial Revolution, men left their physical homes to work outside the area. Fathers became invisible at home or less visible at home, and the ideal of men changed, according to Piercy, when we are in the industrial age. Here's what she says the ideals are of strength in the Industrial Revolution and following: autonomy, aggression, rivalry, ruthlessness, self-centeredness. Now, these were alive before this. They just became more and more prominent in this time. Economic self-seeking became king. Establishing oneself as the dominant masculine ethic emerged, wiping out the competition ethic of loyalty to family and religion ensued. Work became God or religion. Worth was in your position, prestige, power. And on the side then, drinking and gambling and carousing became what you did after work before you went home. So nearly all the reform movements by women were to curtail those excesses and those extremes while the men were away before they came home. So the saloon or the bar was the man's world and in direct competition with the home. So under the old model, this ideal of strength here, forgiving and being magnanimous and benevolent and virtuous and moderate and self-controlled, being a servant leader, being a worthy citizen were lauded. It was okay for men to be brave and resolute and noble and respectful and just. And then this ideal of the secular model, this industrial revolution model emerged, and the values lifted up there were, according to Piercy, fighting, hard drinking, over-gambling, sexual exploitation. That became more and more normalized. Slapped on the back, wow, you're a real man. This is how real men are, according to Piercy. So in the middle of this, when men are out working and coming home late, leaving early, mothers, and she said female teachers, raised boys predominantly during this era. And young men began to balk at the feminization or over-civilization of them, and being real boys meant being rude and rowdy and rebellious and rule-breaking, which could have defined much of my early adulthood. I don't know about if it could define yours as well. Mine was bristling at the restrictions. Oh, if you're a good boy, you have to sit for 8 hours in school without moving. I mean, I was a mover. I remember coming to a parent-teacher conference with our son, Matt, who was not sitting still. And does he have ADHD? Does he have this? We went to the doctors. He didn't have any of that. He was just a boy. And I remember the teacher saying, Sherry said, where are all the pictures of Matt that he drew? Oh, Matt doesn't go into the room where there's pictures drawn. Matt is out using his big muscles. But she was saying it as if it was a pejorative. He was out tumbling and wrestling and running and racing, and she wanted him to be sitting at a desk drawing, which is not terrible if that's your interest and gift as a man, but that was not his interest and gift, and she made him feel and made me and us feel that was not worthy and right. So boys often don't know how to be real men. And so often the only way that they can be released from that is revolt and reject society for kind of the open road. And so after the Industrial Revolution, the books and the movies portray men as rejecting society and going away. The cowboy ideal, hunting, being seamen, soldiers, explorers, frontiersmen who cast off the restraints of civilization and escape to be free, those views were idolized. Some of you have been soldiers. Some of you have been explorers. Some of you have been wildcatters. Some of you have been whatever. Maybe you did it for different reasons than that, but maybe you were living up to an ideal of the societal view of what I'm supposed to be is so restrictive, I just can't live within it. A negative side result of this is men without women except a woman in a saloon or a prostitute at a port. Kind of the noble savage idea where women are just things. You know, for my sermons that I really love Westerns, watching them, reading books. If you track Westerns, there's two ideals in Westerns. One ideal is kind of the rootless, ruthless, solitary, uncommitted, escaping people. Or the other model is heroes as honorable, that have clear morals, that fight for and at risk for the vulnerable, who stand up to evil and injustice. The best Western movies, in my mind, and books have an ethic, have a way to be a man, like The Magnificent Seven, the original, and then the modern retake with Denzel Washington. Those guys, interestingly, are gathered up. They're pretty rootless. They don't have families. They don't have communities. But they're gathered up when they hear there's a community that is being overrun by an evil man and his gang, and they decide to take a stand and fight for somebody else, even if it costs them their life. It does a couple of them. Others afterwards limp off in their horses, going off into the sunset, and we say, wow, could I stand up for people like they stood up for people? In The Magnificent Seven, if you remember, near the end of the movie, a boy says his dad is a coward because he doesn't know how to shoot a gun, but one of the Magnificent Seven, I think it's the Denzel Washington character, says it takes courage to show responsibility. It takes courage to stay. It takes courage to work. It takes courage to show up. It takes courage to be a man in community, not just outside of community. You see how the models in the books and the movies portray both of these ideals? Now, the best of Christianity is not Jesus meek and mild, who can't stand up to anyone. Some people like to present Jesus that way. If you've read the Gospels, he's not that way at all. Jesus confronted the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He put them in their place by saying, woe to you because you do this and you don't do that. He fought against selfishness, not my will, but thine be done. And he courageously goes to the cross for the sins of the world. He overcomes the devil in a fight to the death. Christianity does not suppress men's thirst for risk and adventure, but redirects it to kingdom purposes. Really. So Christianity would say we don't have to run from responsibility, we can embrace it in Christ. You may be familiar with this Harvard study, which she quotes in her book. Harvard has done a study tracking men for nearly 80 years and trying to establish or find what actually makes men happy and feel fulfilled. Here's the results. Researchers discovered that the most important factor in male happiness and health was not isolated fame, not wealth, not social class, not professional achievement. Overwhelmingly, the key factor in male mental health was close, loving relationships. That's why you're here. If you're here, that gives you a chance to risk and be vulnerable with some other people, and out of that, know you're not alone in the world. And if you ask questions about what is it like to be a man here, how can I be a positive man there? I'm tempted to be a man this way there, that you can, through accountability and discussion and prayer, chart a way forward. Even single men can be fathers of the community as coaches and teachers and mentors and church leaders. Do you know there's a website, she said in the book, I didn't know about it, that teaches young people how to change a tire and grill a hamburger and fix a leaky faucet and toilet and fish and hunt, because so many boys have grown up without having dads that have helped them do any of those things. That's sad. And it gives us an opportunity, if we had that in our life, to pass that on to our kids, our grandkids, or the church's kids, or the neighborhood kids, or on and on and on. So I want to challenge you to not be the secular or industrial revolution model of manhood, but the biblical one. Jesus modeled deep relationships with the Father and his disciples. He wasn't scared to go toe-to-toe with power. And when faced with running from what God called him to, he stayed. He said, "Not my will be done." He sacrificed himself for a cause greater than himself. And through the Spirit, we can be men of honor and integrity and strength in the way of care and attention and friendship and focus on others instead of just ourselves. We can step up instead of abdicating. We can challenge each other. We can hold each other accountable. We can teach each other consequences of choices. We can be there for each other when someone needs us in the battle or after the battle, when we're wounded and need to be tended to. Now, abuse and control and intimidation is not the model. It really stems from insecurity and fear. Strength is through the Spirit, calling each of us to the best. So because of Christ and in the power of the Holy Spirit, suck it up. And instead of running or abusing, step up in sacrificial service and strength and be the man of God needed right now in your sphere of influence. Churchill said the price of greatness is responsibility. Think about that for a second. The price of greatness is responsibility. It's not running away and being isolated and alone, far away from everybody else who gives you a hard time. It's seeing where your gifts are and where God has placed you and staying. Take responsibility. Commit to God. Commit to growth. Commit to a church. Commit to each other. You are needed right now. So desperately needed right now. Don't run away. Don't cower. Don't retreat. Your self-controlled, servant, sacrificial leadership after the example of our courageous Jesus Christ is central right now. Right now. Right now. The age of casual Christianity is over, and the age of heroic Christianity is here. Step up. Seriously. I'm in my 10th year. I can say this to us. Step up. Step up.